And then you have floor and ceiling. And they're, floor is down, ceiling is up, as we see in a floor and a ceiling. And they round towards the infinities. Floor goes towards negative infinity, ceiling goes towards positive infinity. So you'll notice that, 5.3, the floor, is 5, the ceiling is 6. Floor is rounding to the left on the number line, ceiling is rounding to the right. Okay. When you have 5.6, it does the exact same thing. Floor rounds to the left on the number line, ceiling rounds to the right. And then when you have negatives, floor, again, rounds to the left. So floor is saying, okay, here's negative 5 on the number line, here's negative 6, and you're over here. So floor rounds to the left, so floor gives you negative 6, and ceiling rounds to the right on the number line, so it gives you negative 5. Right? So those are the rounding functions. Just make sure you keep in mind which does what, because it does make a difference. Okay? And as I demonstrated briefly with format, you can type help and then the name of a function, and what it'll do is give you a help file. And the help file just basically is an explanation of how the function works. So you could type, help sign, and it'll tell you what the function does. It gives you the sign of an argument, the input. So input and argument are basically interchangeable for terminology. It gives you the sign of the argument in radians, right? You can start, you can do that for any function, and MATLAB will give you, a pretty good description of it. Notice you also sometimes see C also, arcsine, and sine D, and those are what MATLAB considers related functions. Okay, so that help is very, very convenient. Okay. You'll also notice something that I'll use extensively in class, which is commenting. The idea of a comment is I want to sometimes make notes in my programs that aren't going to be run, aren't going to be interpreted as MATLAB code. I want to make notes to myself about how things are working, sometimes remind myself to add some code in later. Sometimes I'll have code that's kind of working, and I want to be able to run my program and temporarily have it not run. So that's called commenting out. I say, okay, here's 3 lines of MATLAB code, and I want the first and third lines to run, and for now I don't want the second line to run, so I just put a little comment in front. And if you notice, a comment is a % sign. So in MATLAB, what we do is just say, x equals 5, % sign, writing a comment. So everything to the of the % sign and to the right is not executed, whereas everything to the left is. Right? Yeah. And actually, anyone who's concerned, you can do multi-line comments in MATLAB. They look something like that. And so you start a multi-line comment with %, and then the open squiggly bracket, and end it with % closed squiggly bracket. So that's how you do multi-line comments. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is basically input and output from the MATLAB program. All right. And so let's say, so far we've seen programs that work basically, you run the program and it runs the same every time. But sometimes, and actually, quite often, you want to get input from the user. You want to know how much money, to withdraw from an ATM. So you ask the user, and for that we use the input statement. Okay, so input says, okay, we use the input function. Inside parentheses, the argument is a string, a character string. So it's just plain text. And this is going to be what's displayed to the user, the person sitting at the computer, when this program gets to this line. So it'll show up, please enter how much to withdraw, and it'll wait for the user to type something. And then whatever they type, and then hit enter, it gets saved in the variable on the left. So it's basically you're saying the variable equals some value, right? And that value is what's returned by the input function. So we take a look. We can say x equals input type stuff. And so MATLAB says, okay, type stuff, and it waits for me to type something. So I type 15. And so now x equals 15. Okay, so we can get information into MATLAB, And you already saw last week some ways to get it out of MATLAB. You can use the display function DISP. You could just type, a variable name or number and not put a semicolon at the end of the line, and that would display the value of that variable. And you can also use something which I'm about to introduce called fprintf. And these are basically ways to do extra formatting when you're displaying values. Right? And so what you do with fprintf is you give a format string. You can type something like fprintf my name is, and then wherever you want to insert a value, and wherever you want to insert whatever a variable contains, you put a placeholder. And there's two placeholders you really only have to be concerned with. One's %f, and that's going to be the placeholder for a number. And if you're curious, the f is coming from floating point. It's a float. And what floating point is the way these numbers are stored on the computer. And again, this is something we can talk about. We will talk about towards the end of the course. So that's if you want to put a number in, you use %f. If you want to put text in, a string of characters, you use %s. So my name is probably characters, so I'll say %s. So here's my format string. That's my first input to my fprintf function. And the second thing I have to give it is what it should print out. Okay, so here I can put the name of a variable. I can put just a value by itself. Okay, and so actually I'll make a variable in the previous line, name equals Blaze. And then I'll put name here, the name of the variable. And so what this would print out is my name is, and it would look up the value stored by the variable name, which is Blaze, and insert it here. So this would print out my name is Blaze. Okay. And one thing you need to know is, unlike DISP or not putting a semicolon, this doesn't automatically skip to the next line, right? And what you need to do is, whenever you want to go to the next line, you use a special character called the new line character. And it's represented in MATLAB and pretty much every computer language as /n. Right? And so, I'll just show you an example. So I'll make my variable name, and then I'll say fprintf my name is %s name. It'll say my name is Blaze, but it won't go to the next line. Whatever I type now just starts in the middle of this line, which is kind of annoying. So what I'll do is I put a %n at the end, and that says go to the next line. Or, I'm sorry, not %n, /n. Okay. The thing is, /n you can use anywhere. You can say /n, and now wherever there's a /n, it's basically equivalent of hitting enter on your keyboard in a word processor. Okay. And one more thing you need to know is that for numbers, instead of having just plain %f, you can start using %point something f. This thing here, %.2f. And what this means, make some space up there, is display 2 digits after the decimal. Right? So you'll notice it's a %f, but then there's a decimal point and a number. And it's 2 digits after the decimal. Okay? And so let's look at an example of that. So here, I make a variable, the name's going to store Jones, x is 14.7. And so if I try this first one, it'll say Mr. Jones has 14.70000 MATLAB books. And basically, however many it would print out by saying x equals 14.7, so I guess 3 O's, is what it actually displays.